From around 1492 to 1914, Western Europe colonized approximately 80% of the world until these new nations gained autonomy and established independence. As a refresher, imperialism is defined as the policy, practice, or advocacy of extending the power and dominion of a nation, especially by direct territorial acquisitions or by gaining indirect control over the political or economic life of other areas. This political philosophy resulted in many expansions throughout Western Europe and the Americas that still show prevalent ramifications in today's world. Many economic and political tensions between nations trace back to the colonial era. The artificial borders drawn by European powers disrupted traditional ethnic and cultural boundaries, leading to long-standing conflicts. This is seen in the ongoing conflict between Pakistan and India over the Kashmir region as a direct consequence of the partitioning of British India in 1947 into two new nations along religious lines. Resource extraction by colonial powers also left many nations exploited and impoverished. Beyond just geopolitical tensions, imperialism had deeply dehumanizing cultural impacts as well. The civilizing mission mentality provided by Europeans promoted the belief that European culture was superior, while the conquered peoples were regarded as primitive and inferior. This racism was used to justify oppressive policies of forced assimilation and cultural suppression. Even today, the toxic legacy of this colonial mindset persists in societal attitudes. Additionally, the effects reverberate economically in our globalized world. Many modern multinational corporations can trace their origins and capital accumulation back to the extraction of resources from colonies, arguably giving Western nations an unfair head start in the age of industrialization. Fundamentally, global economic inequalities and the domination of Western nations cannot fully be disentangled from the history of imperialism. Social Darwinism is given a foundation from the core of eugenics developed by Charles Darwin, a theory that individuals, groups, and peoples are subject to the same Darwinian laws of natural selection as plants and animals. This idea of natural selection and superiority over less developed nations deemed Europeans fit to rule over other groups at the expense of human welfare and natural resources. The contemporary impacts of imperialism are evident when examining real-world examples across different societies. For example, in India, the legacy of British colonial rule remains present over 75 years after independence. Arbitrary geographic partition of British India into Indian Pakistan in 1947 set the stage for a conflict over the Kashmir region that has continued for decades. Beyond this conflict, British cultural imperialism also lives on through India's continued use of the English language in government, education, and as a lingua franca. Under British rule, European racial superiority permeated all aspects of colonial society, fostering an inferiority complex among the native population. Examples of psychology-cultural oppression under imperialism existed everywhere from the Americas to Asia. The Spanish Catholic missionaries who colonized the Philippines in the 16th century imposed systematic programs to destroy ancestral cultural identities of indigenous peoples. The former Spanish colonies across Latin America, the caste system of societal grouping implemented during imperial rule created a cultural hierarchy that persists today in more insidious forms. Individuals of European ethnic descent enjoy higher social status and privilege, while indigenous peoples exist on the lowest rungs. This systematic racism stemming from colonial doctrines of white supremacy continues driving discrimination, exclusion, and extreme inequalities in nations like Guatemala, Bolivia, and Peru. Economically speaking, effects of imperialism compound global inequalities through the modern-day corporate exploitation of developing nations. Using capital resources accumulated from centuries of colonial practices to hit local markets and to marginalize domestic industries, deplete natural resources, and leverage tax that drain capital from developing nations. And that's pretty much it.